Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker. And you know, a lot of times when we feel like we're dealing with things that are really difficult, there are always others that are dealing with things maybe a little bit worse than we realize or think about. We are so very glad to have with us Coach Tommy Minton with Vanderbilt Catholic. Coach, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me, Keith. It's a pleasure to be here.
We appreciate it. Now, we sometimes come on, we talk about the good news and the plans that we have and how things are going, but this was a pretty surprising impact about Coach Cryer and him passing.
Yeah, I mean, it's total shock. Tuesday afternoon, we're getting ready to go to football practice. Me and Coach had spent a good portion of the time together during the day, and you know, he just started feeling bad, and suffered a heart attack and passed away. And it was a total shock. It was, you know, you just don't know how to handle it. It's almost like you feel like you're in the middle of a bad dream.
Yeah, and I tell you, we've had some bad dreams here of late, you know, and they say things tend to happen in threes. COVID and how it's lasted and how it's impacted us and not going away, and then we get this traumatic hurricane that comes through, and then something like this happens with Coach Cryer. So hopefully things will end in threes, but Coach Cryer was somebody that made an impact, huh? Tell us a little bit about the man that those of us didn't know him, some things that maybe we don't know.
Well, I've known Charlie for a large part of my adult life, and
okay.
We were competitors. We competed against each other. Charlie was a head coach for over 23 years.
Right.
And he won a state championship at Vermillion Catholic as a head coach. He's had a lot of success. He was a very good football player at LSU. Was a starting offensive tackle at LSU in the Dalton Hilliard era.
Wow.
And
we know how good Dalton was running the ball, and,
Exactly.
and a lot of that is because of who was blocking for him up front.
Exactly.
So it says a lot about him as a football player.
Yes. And I'm going to tell you, Charlie's the type of guy that if you were at a school function standing with him, or if you're standing with him on duty at recess, every kid that passed by Charlie was going to speak to him. They wanted to stop and talk to him because they would walk away laughing and smiling. That's the way he made people feel.
Wow.
And he just, you know, he had that way about him. He's a big, boisterous guy that, you know, he could make you laugh. I told the team this morning, you know, we've had some prayer services. It's been really, really somber in the locker room and around school. And I told them this morning, I said, you know what, guys, I'm tired of dwelling on the sadness. Charlie gave me some of the biggest laughs I've ever had in my life. I mean, we had some good times at coaching clinics, and we've had some good times, you know, just talking football, and he gave me some of the biggest laughs I've ever had, and I want to think about that. I want to remember him in that way, and that's where I am going forward now.
Well, and you know, you make a really good point. It's interesting that someone's character is often defined by the little things that happen, not the big things. But his was defined by both the big laughs, but more importantly, that the fact that kids were drawn to him. It says a lot about who he was as a person and the impact that he made on all those students and student athletes.
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, coaching and teaching, you're in the kid business.
Yep.
And you know, sometimes we lose sight of that fact, and Charlie never did. And the other thing about him, he's one of the most selfless people I've ever been around in my life.
Wow.
I will never forget the last words Charlie Cryer spoke to me. He's our trainer, and me and the other coaches are trying to get him to go to the emergency room because he's feeling bad. And in the middle of having a heart attack, we find out later. And he said, Coach, he said, I'm not going to go to the hospital and be a distraction to this team when we got an important ball game this week.
Wow.
So, and that's the last words that, you know, we really talked, because we forced him in the car and brought him to the hospital.
Right. You were doing that whether he wanted to or not because you cared about him. And so it's so very interesting that people like that, even in their worst moments, they're still more concerned about other people. Maybe the greatest definition of selfless that we can share about him. Let's talk a little bit about, he won a championship.
Yeah, he won a state championship.
He was awfully proud of that, right?
Yeah. He was. I mean, he did a great job at Vermilion Catholic. Vermilion Catholic is a program that's got a lot of history, but that history actually kind of started with Charlie.
Wow.
He was an assistant coach there for a few years, and he took over the head job when they had been down a little bit. And he led them to the Dome. They beat Kentwood for the state championship.
Oof.
And it was a great season for him. And he's had some very good quarterfinal, semifinal teams at St. Mary's, at St. Louis High School in Lake Charles. He was the head coach there. Had a couple of quarterfinal teams that were very good. One year, they came down here and beat Edie White, who was a top 4 seed that year,
right?
And beat him in Thibodeau. So, he had a ton of success as a coach, and he's got a football that he sits on his desk that commemorates the state championship team. And just Sunday night, we got done game planning for this week. We were sitting in the office, me and him were the last 2 in there, and we were talking, and he, I made the comment. I said, we got to get one more of those, Charlie. I really want one of those on my desk. I've been there twice and never won one. He said, Coach, he said, it's the second greatest accomplishment of my life. And I looked at him. He said, well, I got 3 kids that are very successful. He said, that's my greatest accomplishment.
I don't know that better words could have been said to honor him. Coach Tommy, thank you so very much for coming on and sharing with us about him. And maybe in his honor, we'll go and chase that other football, right?
There you go.
All right. Very good. Coach, we thank you. We appreciate it very much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. That'll do it for this edition of Bayou Time. Don't go anywhere. A whole lot more local programming when we continue.